Hello from Texas and Notary TV podcast. Welcome to our series on identifying signers and all the things that go along with that task. I'm Brenda Stone.
And I'm Jake Burkhalter. This episode is about credentials that may be used to identify signers. We will also look at examples of credentials and analyze them to see if they pass or fail. A credential is an identification card, or what we like to think of as an ID. We'll go into that a little bit later.
And yes, we are watching our notes closely because if we don't, we will wander off and talk about things that have nothing to do with this subject because we're both ADHD. We used to say ID or DL or passport, but these days, credential has become part of our official state of Texas language in our laws. And so we need to learn to use that word credential. In future episodes, we plan to cover use of credible witnesses as a method to identify signers, use of personal knowledge as a method to identify signers, the process of actually identifying a signer when the name on the document doesn't quite match the name on the credential, and notes that you may want to jot down in your journal regarding this identification task. It is vitally important to read your laws and to know what is said about notary procedures and how they're supposed to be performed. That's why we put that information in all of our materials. And by the way, the material you see here on the screen appears on Notary.tv under the heading Articles.
There are three legal methods that Texas notaries may use when identifying signers. A notary must write in the record book which method was used. And it's a good idea that you go ahead and take note of this citation and review it in its entirety.
The three methods are personal knowledge, use of a credible witness, and use of a credential. We'll go over the first two methods briefly, but today's focus is more so on the use of a credential because notary signing agents most often use, and mobile notaries most often use, credentials to identify signers.
Method one is personal knowledge. If you, as the notary, personally know the signer well enough and you're well acquainted with them, you may proceed without requiring any additional type of identification. Method two, the use of a credible witness. There's actually two ways you can use a credible witness to identify a signer. As Brenda had mentioned, we'll dive into this in a different episode, but you definitely want to follow that and watch that video because it's a good resource because most notaries are not familiar with this method. The first one is that you, again, as the notary, personally know the credible witness this time, and that credible witness in turn personally knows the signer who may not have a valid credential, maybe expired, whatever the case may be. The other method to the credible witness is where you do not personally know the credible witness, but that witness still knows the signer. So your credible witness can be introduced to you by using their credential. And of course, the most common method three is the use of a credential. In this scenario, you would accept a proper credential in order to determine the identification of the signer.
There are many types of credentials that notaries are asked to accept as identification. And I'm kind of laughing because there's just so many things, if it has their name on it and some lamination, then a signer often thinks that ought to be plenty enough identification to sign important loan documents. But we know that's not the case. So we are frequently asked to accept identification that isn't authorized by our Texas state laws. And that's why we're making this video. We're going to give you the exact criteria that any ID must meet that you agree to take and put down in your journal as the way you identified a signer. Okay, right off the top of my head or out of my notes, I can tell you that there are 3 reliable credentials that are preferred usually. I mean, there's no law that it's preferred, but they're just people are familiar with US passport books, and they meet all the criteria, while US passport cards, as a side note, don't. State driver's license are one of those 3 reliable means of credentialing. It's a good credential. That's what I'm trying to say. And then state issued identification cards are also reliable and common.
Let's go over some of the red tape that are the requirements for a credential. The most showstopper would be that it must be issued by a federal government, or excuse me, the federal government, or a state government as defined by the Texas Government Code. And again, you want to take note on that citation because we're just going to paraphrase it here. By definition, federal includes a department, bureau, or other agency of the United States of America. And by definition, state includes any state, district, commonwealth, territory, and insular possession of the United States, and any area subject to the legislative authority of the United States of America. So don't forget our friends in a U.S. territory. And again, this definition, if you were to use a different state's driver's license or valid credential, that it's issued by that state. Head of state, whatever may be issuing, DMV, whatever the equivalent may be. I was trying to think of that one, but we're focusing on Texas here. It must have an expiration date and be current. That's another big showstopper. For me, I usually look at that. The expiration date just pops out so, vividly. So if that's the case and it's expired, you cannot accept it. Must also have a signature. Must also display a photo of the credential owner. There is a special exception that some notaries still are not exposed to and do not have knowledge of, and that's a foreign passport. And in that case, it may only be used in one circumstance. And this is very important for you to know. Again, it must be unexpired, signature, all the other elements, but it must be in relation to a document that's used either for a deed or another real estate transaction, but the property, the classification must be residential. So again, a foreign passport, yes, if that particular document involves a residential real estate property. If you find out the documents for vacant land, a big commercial building, maybe they're buying an entire apartment complex, anything that's not residential, you would not be able to use that foreign passport.
So when you actually accept a credential from your signer and you run it through your mind, is there a expiration date? Was it issued? Suppose it's not a regular one that we see, a passport or a driver's license. Is there an expiration date? Is there a signature? Is there a photo? And was it issued by the right agencies, state or federal? So you have them take it out of their wallet, because frequently they want to just flip it open and show it to you in their wallet. Now, I don't find that to be a problem with loan signing clients, but somebody who's not been through a process quite so rigorously, like a mobile notary client, maybe who wants to sign a power of attorney, they might just want to show you that credential in their wallet, because there's a lot of mischief that can go on in that situation. So have them pull it out. You can feel it. You need to feel it and be able to see the photo. Look at the person who gave it to you. Look at the signature on the credential, and then ask them to sign your journal and sort of give it a little compare, and review that credential for authentic elements, the elements that'll make it sure to you that it is an authentic credential.
Here are a few hallmarks of determining the authenticity of an ID. You would be familiar with the characteristics of what an authentic ID would be, Texas driver's license specifically in our presentation today. For instance, in the Texas driver's license, it has the following characteristics that are below. We won't dive into these here in this video, but they are available to you on our website. And also, here's a link to directly that comes from the Texas Department of Public Safety, who issues the driver's licenses and the identification cards. There's an older version, which eventually will be phased out in the near future. And most of you by now, if you've renewed, had a lost ID, a change of address, whatever it may be, you like more than likely now you have the newer version of the ID.
Okay, so we have got treats in for you, boy. We are going to go over some samples of acceptable and unacceptable credentials. Now, we're not going to go over this table because that would just be boring. Want to make note to you that a military ID is usually a fail because all elements are seldom present. And we pulled that one up to mention separately because by the citation set out above the table there, you must, you just be aware you can't make a copy of a military ID. And frequently in our work as notary signing agents, those kinds of things are asked of us. So just be sure you don't do it. Let's see. And like I said, hopefully one day the military will will understand that notaries, that their ID sort of fails a notary being able to use it because it may have an expiration date. It may not. It may have a signature. It may not. So anyway, it's kind of weird that that's not something we can accept. Okay, right here we have at the very top. Oh, and just note that the yellow squares on each page are representative of the requirements for a valid credential that notaries can use. And we'll go down that list and pick what's not working for each of the examples we're going to cover. Okay, so we got brand new passport. Look, you can read that for yourself and you'll be able to look to access this handout after after we finish this recording and editing, and there will be a link in our comments, as well as some place where you can download it from our website as well. All right, so assume that as we go through this list of the images that are credentials, that that if they have a date, they are current, because I don't think many of them are, to be honest. But anyway, okay, the U.S. passport, as we've already covered, is a reliable common credential. The U.S. passport, that's the book. The U.S. passport card, on the other hand, fails the test because while it is issued by a state or federal government, it has an expiration date, it has a photo, it does not have a signature, which is a disappointment. Okay, so here we have Texas state driver's license, and we mentioned previously that these are perfectly reliable and common uses. And so I think we've got an older and a newer version there. Nope, that's not it at all. It's a state ID card and a driver's license. Next page here we have, and I don't pretend to know what these cards may be called other than what they are, what's stated right there. But the main thing is every card that you are, or credential that you're handed as a means to get ID for a signer, you just run it through that little test. And that's why we decided to put it on every page of our pictures, because if we say it enough and y'all actually listen and watch this video, which you may choose, it's just too dry and boring, and you may not. But if you do, then by the time we finish this, you'll be thinking like we do and checking to see that it has been issued by the right place. It is that has an expiration date and it is current, and that the credential has a photo and a signature. All right, the first one is a permanent resident card. I think this one may be a little bit older than the next one. Both of these fail because of lack of signatures. Let's see, they do have expiration dates, they do have photos, but no signature, and they are issued by the U.S. government. Okay, this one is a Form I-766, an employment authorization document. When I do ID verification for employers, I do accept this card. It is on their list, but it is not adequate for notary identification purposes, not in Texas, because it does not have a signature. Okay, we've got a trusted traveler ID. Somebody just handed it to me. I look at it and I'm like, I'm sorry, this fails my test, because I don't say it out loud like that, but I'm thinking to myself, no signature, can't use it. It's debatable. I mean, Jake and I have kind of argued over this. Is this an U.S. ID, or is it a contractor of the U.S. where I'm not really sure. He's not really he's pretty confident, but the bottom line is I can't find the name of a state or the federal government on this. So I'm not going to accept it, but based mostly because it has no signature. All right, and then there's the ever lovely and popular international driving permit, which I think requires about the same thing as when you get a box of Cracker Jacks and open the toy. There's not a lot of meat there. It's not issued by the United States. It's it has everything else, but it doesn't come from the United States of America. It's just an international driver's document. And then our Social Security card is obviously not meeting the expectations. It has no signature, no picture, and no expiration date. The VA, here's just an example, U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs. It fails because it has no signature and no expiration date, although it meets the other requirements. The U.S. Department of Defense, it has an expiration date, and the problem is it has no signature. Now, please understand, we're not saying patently never accept a U.S. Department of Defense or never accept a VA Veterans Affairs card. That's not it at all. What all we're going by is, was it issued by a state or federal government of the United States, the U.S. government, federal government, or a state or territory of the U.S. government? Does it have an expiration date, and is it current? Does it have a photo of the bearer, and does it have a signature of the bearer? That's basically it. We're not telling you anything about the card itself, or it can never be accepted, because, say for instance, if these became a document that were signed and they had the signature on the document, then, or the credential, I should say, then we would have no problem accepting them, because they're from the U.S. government. They are not expired and they have an expiration date. They've got photos, and we just are missing a signature. So anyway, and when I say they're not expired, it's because I said imagine, if you will, when we first started this. So anyway, now, Jake, did I miss anything while I was rambling on there about each of those documents? Did I miss anything or make an error that you noticed?
No, not at all. I just want to clarify when you're talking about the traveler's card, and this is
Okay.
what I'm confused. And I've seen a few people ask this lately, so that's why I wanted to bring it up.
Okay,
It's the
I'm
TWIC
sorry
card,
for the rush. Okay, there we go.
the TWIC card. That's the trusted or transportation trusted card. Don't quote me on it. I don't know if that replaced this, but that particular card is issued by TSA, but I didn't find an example. I think they changed them. It does not have a signature. Most of them look like the new VA cards or a government employee, where they all have the chip set in the card. And because these folks go through such a scrutiny of a process and a background check, and their threat level to the country and national security. People think that, hey, this is the big deal. I got this car. This should be accepted everywhere. But again, you have to give precedence to Texas notarial law. You also have pushback with the matriculate card that's issued from Mexico, because a lot of banking transactions and even mortgage and financial transactions, stocks, bonds, anything with money, their laws are different. They can accept a few more of these documents than we can. So as Brenda mentioned several times on this little sticky notice there, the requirements, stick with those 4 elements, and that's your safe haven to what you can and cannot accept.
That's right. So I guess that I have nothing else to add to this except that what are we going to dive into next on the ID series, Jake?
Let's do credible witnesses.
Okay. Sounds good to me. We could probably do personal knowledge in that one too, just a quick, because that's really kind of a no-brainer once you understand it.
Right.
All right. Okay, well, if y'all have any questions or preferences, please put them in the comments, and don't forget to help us by subscribing to our channel and liking this video. Anything else?
I think that's it. Thank you guys so much for your time. We look forward to seeing you in a future video. And again, please comment any suggestions, and along those lines, we'll be happy to review them and make sure we tailor the content accordingly.
Thank you. Good night.